At University College Hospital in London, the new technology is already an everyday part of the working environment. For instance, premature babies like this need constant monitoring for such things as abnormal breathing patterns. And microelectronic devices are good at just that, freeing the staff for other jobs and making more effective use of their time. But the equipment is relatively simple. It hardly uses any computer power, just the odd Beeb or Apple tucked away for, say, data recording. That information is combined with more traditional examinations. The problem is that the doctors still only have external symptoms to work with, when what they really want to know is what's going on inside the patient. But nowadays, new techniques like ultrasound are available. They use more powerful computers, and they allow the doctor to take a lengthy and safe look at what's going on inside. One of the biggest uses of ultrasound today is for scanning of pregnant women. All the evidence suggests that it's entirely safe, and in experienced hands, ultrasound is relatively easy to use. But the images aren't that easy to interpret for the untrained eye. If you look carefully, you can see the head and the features on the face, and so can the mother.
Right, you can see the face. One eye, and the other eye. See that? Oh yeah. And the chin.
The technique works by sending out beams of high-frequency sound, ultrasound, into the body. The beams are reflected from the structures inside and bounce off in all directions. To get a high-quality image, there are several transmitters and lots of reflected signals. The computer has to analyze all the reflected signals and interpret them as an image on the screen for the doctors. Ultrasound is already an accepted and relatively commonplace technique in most hospitals. But with the cost of machines rising all the time, the medical professionals are having to carry out cold-hearted cost-benefit analysis. Could the money be better spent elsewhere? Is patient care really improved? Those types of questions are even more important in a much newer area of high-tech medicine.
Fine, all we're going to do is take some pictures of your head. The first picture we're going to take, I'm going to move you through the scanner. And the table will just slide.
One step higher up the ladder is computerized tomography, or CT for short, a highly developed form of X-ray imaging. It's not unusual for CT machines to cost £750,000. For a CT scan, the patient is placed in the exact center of the machine. There's an X-ray source on one side and a detector on the other. A very narrow beam of X-rays goes right through the patient. The difference in CT scanning is that this process is repeated many times at different angles. The readings from the different beams are of little practical value until they're interpreted by the online mini-computer. The specially written software combines all the data to make up the final image.
Okay, Linda, we're going to do a scan now. Just keep it.
Remarkably, the image processing takes only a few seconds. The result is an image of a slice through the patient's body. In this case, a slice through the head, through the brain. Such three-dimensional views of soft tissue like the brain could simply not be obtained by conventional X-ray. And the technique is equally good at scanning other parts of the body.
This patient, a young man of 28, came to us complaining of back pain. His conventional X-rays showed a collapse of a vertebral body. This is the CT slice through the abnormal spinal vertebra. There's the heart, the lungs on each side, and there is the back. The detailed view demonstrates the tumor which is destroying the vertebral body, and the spinal cord within the vertebra is compressed and displaced to the left side. We therefore decided to obtain tissue from that area with a needle biopsy, which was guided by the CT scanner. This is my biopsy needle, which has been very accurately placed on the surface of the tumor. Using CT guidance, we were then able to drill through the tumor and obtain tissue for histology, for examination in the laboratory, avoiding damaging the spinal cord. Very fortunately, histological examination of the tumor showed it to be radiosensitive, and hopefully he will get a very good response from irradiation. The CT scanner here has avoided the necessity for an open operation in order to get the tissue for histological examination.
But now there are those who would argue that CT itself may soon be eclipsed by the very latest technology, magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI for short, providing pictures in a completely new way. In general terms, what sort of things is MRI used for?
Well, if I may just take you to task over the term MRI, which means magnetic resonance imaging, which implies that this enormously powerful diagnostic tool is a very expensive camera. That it is not. It's an instrument which can measure almost any physiological processes and abnormalities in the body. It's an instrument which can take pictures, of course, but the pictures are based on living chemistry rather than shadowgrams, which we're used to with X-rays.
MRI is particularly important because it can give information about the body in a non-invasive way. No X-rays, no radioactive drugs, and certainly no exploratory surgery. For an MRI scan, the patient is placed right inside the machine at the center of a very powerful magnetic field. The technique looks at individual hydrogen atom nuclei in the body, each of which acts like a tiny magnet. In the magnetic field generated by the machine, the tiny magnets all line up. Then a second magnetic field is applied at right angles to the first field. The nuclei turn and line up with the second field. If that second magnet is suddenly turned off, the nuclei move back to their previous positions and they give off a radio frequency signal. For a whole body, there are billions of signals from billions of nuclei. The latest generation of 32-bit mini-computers are needed to work out the number and position of the nuclei and display them as an image on the screen, and all in a few seconds. Even though this technique has been available only for a short time, there are already numerous applications, from heads to whole bodies. And not an X-ray anywhere, just a harmless magnetic field. At the Brompton, they have a special use for this new technique.
We're using the machine to study the cardiovascular system, and this is the most important area, really, of contemporary medicine. Half of us are due to die of one disease process, which is blocked arteries to the brain and to the heart, causing coronary and stroke. And a vast amount of diminution of quality of life is caused by arterial disease. Our long-term objective is to use this as a population screening instrument, for which we have a lot more work to do, and to really get at the natural history of this disease which is decimating us, and to monitor the efficacy of treatments.
It's clear that computerized systems have a vital role to play in healthcare. But the general picture which emerges is of this important new technology being applied in a piecemeal and haphazard way, when what is really needed is a centralized policy. Remember, if your GP or your hospital isn't using a computerized system, well, they may be putting your life unnecessarily at risk.
Following up our story last week about the use of computerized direct mail techniques, we were interested to see that the SDP used them considerably in last week's by-election in Greenwich. They targeted specific groups like people who bought their own council houses, publicans, policemen and head teachers. Steve Bilcliffe of the Labour Party headquarters has written to inform us that last year they raised £150,000 by direct mail appeals, and this year they hope to make it £400,000. So it really does look as though the political letterbox campaigns are beginning to hot up. Next week we'll be visiting Disney's Epcot Centre in Florida and taking a look at the boom in desktop publishing. Until then, goodbye.